The Northrop B-2 Spirit stealth bomber was used for the first time in 7 years. The mission? To blow up several Houthi underground bunkers in Yemen. Using the B-2 bombers this way could be considered overkill, as the Houthis didn't have any real means of defending themselves. But the devastation of Houthi pirates is not just about stopping this Yemeni insurgent force, it's about sending a message to the enemies of the US, and in more ways than one. How? Let's dig deeper into it. We'll start with the actual operation and its scope. On October 17, 2024, B-2 Spirit bomber aircraft delivered precision strikes on 5 hardened underground weapon storage bunkers in the Houthi-controlled areas of Yemen. The goal was to disable the weapon systems that the Houthis had scattered across several underground bunkers, which could have been used to endanger ships or even entire cities. The US Department of Defense, the DoD, further stated that the operation was a unique demonstration of the United States' ability to target facilities that its adversaries seek to keep out of reach, no matter how deeply buried underground, hardened, or fortified. The exact specifics of the operation weren't revealed, and neither was the number of bombers involved. Additionally, there were no details on the payloads that the bombers used or which route they took to reach Yemen. It's also not clear what, if any, real damage was done to the Houthis. Their attacks on Israel-linked vessels in the Red Sea, which have led to an 80% reduction in traffic through the Red Sea, continued unabated. This leaves us having to speculate on some of the details. For now, let's go over the key notes from the DoD description of the attack. The targets were 5 hardened underground bunkers. The word hardened here carries a lot of weight, as it implies that the bunkers were not only dug into the ground, but reinforced on the sides and top, potentially even to serve as bases of operation. Then there's the second line about the US using the attack as a demonstration of its ability to target sites that were seemingly out of reach. That is, they would be out of reach for anyone apart from the US. When combined, the DoD wording directly implies that the choice of using B-2s was important for a few reasons. The first, and perhaps most obvious, is the fact that B-2s are capable of carrying so-called bunker-busting weapons. Now, the DoD didn't clarify whether the B-2s actually used a specific type of bunker-busting payload. However, there are a few likely candidates that could have been deployed in Yemen. The first is the 2,000-pound BLU-109 hard-target penetrating warhead. The warhead is made from a 1-inch thick steel casing and carries roughly 550 to 600 pounds of explosive, typically a TNT aluminium mixture called tritonal. Tritonal is roughly 18% more effective than pure TNT of the same weight. Like most penetrating warheads, the warhead's fuse is mechanically and electronically delayed. This means that the warhead doesn't explode on impact itself. Instead, the fuse starts when it detects that the casing has impacted the target. The reinforced steel casing penetrates through the ground or cement as deeply as possible before the delayed fuse detonates the charge. This maximizes the potential penetrative force of the warhead. The Blue 109 is estimated to be able to penetrate at least 6 feet of reinforced concrete. Some sources suggest that the bomb is likely able to pierce 8 feet of concrete and significantly more of compacted ground. What this all means is that the Blue 109 is typically powerful enough to be used on shallow underground bunkers, or those that don't have reinforced casing on their roofs. In fact, Israel used Blue 109s paired with targeting and guidance systems to target the Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah in late September. The attacks, which killed 33 people and wounded 195 more, showcased the potential for Blue 109s to be used not as bunker-piercing warheads, but as air-to-surface missiles. This indicates that they might have much more limited use in modern warfare. The other option would be the 4,000-pound GBU-28. Similarly to the Blue 109, the GBU, short for Guided Bomb Unit, is made from a steel casing that carries an explosive warhead. In the 28's case, the warhead initially consisted of roughly 630 pounds of tritonal. However, later designs of the GBU-28 increased the overall weight to 5,000 pounds and swapped the tritonal for a more potent explosive called AFX-757. While the explosive doesn't seem to have a much higher yield in terms of energy output, it's easier and cheaper to make and mold into the warhead, which could impact how many of these bombs the US could field and deploy. The GBU-28's penetrative power is estimated to be as much as 2.5 times that of the early Blue 109, thanks to the heavier casing and a longer penetrative rod. Some reports indicate the weapon could pierce through around 150 feet of earth or 15 feet of reinforced concrete. While only 2 GBU-28s were initially used during the Gulf War, a third was deployed during Operation Iraqi Freedom. Despite these uses, the weapon remains rare, possibly due to limited production or challenges in effectiveness against highly reinforced targets, which makes the third option the likelier to have been used. That's the 5,000-pound GBU-72. a direct improvement over the GBU-28 model. However, there are no exact specifications for the GBU-72's piercing abilities. The weapon's program director has suggested that the 72 was significantly more destructive than the early iterations of the GBU-28. But what makes this option potentially more likely? Well, the final option for the piercing warhead would probably be overkill. The GBU-57, called the MOP, or Massive Ordnance Penetrator, was actually developed earlier than the GBU-72. It's an astonishing 30,000-pound weapon, with 6,000 pounds of enhanced explosive that's far more effective than TNT. The penetrative casing, which is slightly over 3 inches thick, can pierce through as much as 60 feet of 5,000 psi reinforced concrete, or 8 feet of 10,000 psi reinforced concrete, the latter being the type used in high-rise building columns. Against unreinforced bunkers, it's suggested that the casing can punch through more than 200 feet of earth. The penetrative power of the 30,000-pound GBU-57 is estimated to be just enough to pierce through practically any existing nuclear bunker. Considering that the Houthis likely don't have anything close to nuclear bunker building capacity, the GBU-57 would be a waste of valuable resources in Yemen. With the GBU-57 representing the upper range of penetrative power and the older GBU-28s the lower range, the GBU-72, the third option, can likely penetrate through about 30 feet of 5,000 psi reinforced concrete. Even this would probably be more than enough to completely demolish Houthi bunkers. However, there's another aspect that could have influenced which types of penetrative bombs the US used in Yemen: the targeting system. The GBU-28 contains a laser-guided system with inertial navigation and GPS capability. This allows the pilots to pre-plan the warhead's flight path and optimize a drop point so that the casing falls at the right angle and velocity, maximizing the destructive power. For the other two likely options, the bombs rely on dedicated GPS and inertial navigation systems with specialized tail kits. These kits incorporate advanced electronics along with aerodynamic fins and strakes that improve control. In some cases, these enhancements add another 15 to 20 miles of effective gliding range, allowing bombers to deploy the weapons from a greater distance. This means that even the older Blue 109 with an attached JDAM could prove to be deadly when used on reinforced bunkers. The lower weight of the 109s allows the B-2s to carry 16 of the munitions at once. With the JDAM system taking care of targeting and timing, the operators can use multiple munitions on a single bunker. The first weapon would dig a hole into the ground and pierce as deeply as possible, then explode. The second BLU would then use the hole created by the first as an entry point. This could potentially more than double their penetrative power, mimicking a significantly larger warhead. Additionally, the ability to carry multiple JDAM-enabled bombs on a single bomber allows the US Air Force to minimize the number of aircraft deployed. The move to use the B-2 specifically against an opponent as technologically disadvantaged compared to the US as the Houthi rebels likely doesn't have much to do with the Houthis themselves. Nor is the choice between the 2,000 or the 5,000-pound bunker buster bombs particularly important in terms of global geopolitics. Instead, it seems the US has used the B-2s to send a message to Iran. Iran has spent significant amounts to fund not only the Houthis, but practically all insurgent anti-Israeli groups in the Middle East. Additionally, Iran has been rapidly developing its own weapons systems. What Iran lacks in technology is compensated for by the quantity and variety of its missile stockpile, with 12 different types of missiles confirmed to be at its disposal. Notably, it appears that Iran has been sending its stockpiles of mid- to long-range missiles to its proxies abroad, allowing other anti-Israeli groups, including the Houthis, to repeatedly target Israel while retaining plausible deniability itself. Iran itself launched a massive attack on Israel on October 1, 2024, using 181 ballistic missiles, which are more difficult to target and intercept. However, Israeli defenses, coupled with an early warning by the US when the launches were detected, led to most of the missiles failing to make any significant impact in the country, at least according to Israel and supportive Western media. However, the missile attack was a clear indication that Iran is prepared to retaliate against Israeli aggression against it, such as attacking its consulate in Damascus and assassinating Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh in a Tehran guest house, by attacking Israel directly rather than through its usual proxies. Why does this matter? Well, over the past few decades, Iran has moved most of its air force, command centers, storage facilities, and missile launch systems below ground. A prime example is the underground Ogab-44 hybrid tactical airbase, on which construction was shown to have begun before 2016. The facility overlooks important shipping routes in the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz. The hybrid part of the name is meant to imply that the base accommodates both manned aircraft and drones. The purpose of the base is seemingly simple. By making the base's runways open directly into the Persian Gulf, Iran has the opportunity to deploy its aircraft directly onto the sea, giving it first strike advantage when targeting US military bases scattered across the southern part of the Middle East, as well as various ships that the US Navy has put on permanent patrol throughout the area. A potentially even greater threat lies in the nuclear enrichment facility, reportedly buried deep within the Zagros Mountains. A design meant to evade detection and withstand destruction. US intelligence first uncovered signs of Iran's excavation efforts in 2009, though the exact timeline of the facility's construction remains murky. Once operational, this hidden stronghold could enable Iran to produce military-grade uranium. The country has previously only limited itself to creating uranium of a grade sufficient for power plants. However, after the 2015 Iran nuclear agreement was dissolved in 2018, Iran has blatantly started to ignore the restriction on making military-grade uranium, or something close to it. Currently, it's estimated that Iran's nuclear enrichment capabilities without the new facility are at 83% purity, close to the 90% needed for military use. The most recent satellite imagery of the complex near Natanz suggests that the facility is being built at a depth of between 260 and 330 feet. That would put it at a depth that conventional US bunker busters probably can't reach. Remember, the GBU-57 is rated for roughly 200 feet of earth or 60 feet of reinforced cement, not both. If, as expected, the base has a significant layer of protection, a single strike from a bunker buster bomb might not be enough to damage it. With the nuclear enrichment base built specifically to boost Iran's uranium refining capabilities, the country might finally be able to make military-grade uranium. While Iran suspended a protocol allowing short-notice inspections in February 2021, the IAEA continues to cooperate with Iran on a limited basis, conducting periodic inspections and seeking explanations for nuclear activity. Despite this, some analysts warn that Iran could be just weeks away from producing enough fissile material for an atomic bomb, should it choose to pursue one. However, before Iran could announce that it has a working nuclear bomb at its disposal, it would likely need to conduct several rounds of testing. These would need to use at least a bit of military-grade uranium to deliver enough data for the purposes of producing a full-scale bomb. With the US's surveillance and intelligence capabilities, it's highly unlikely that these tests will go unnoticed. So even if Iran does get close to making a nuclear bomb, the US and NATO would probably be aware of their progress. It's worth noting that the long-standing fatwa issued by Iran's supreme leader, the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, against the production of nuclear weapons on the basis that this will be against Islam remains in place. However, in October 2024, as a consequence of the escalating direct military confrontation between Iran and Israel, a group of Iranian parliamentarians petitioned Khamenei to withdraw the fatwa. So far, he has responded to the effect that this is not necessary yet. However, that could change quickly if Israel demonstrates that it's willing and able to strike significant blows to Iran's critical facilities. And that's perhaps exactly why the US decided to take the B-2s for a spin in Yemen. The operation showcased that the US is willing and able to devote a few of its 19 stealth bombers and ferry them all the way from their home base in Missouri to the Middle East. The bombers have an enormous operational range of 6,000 nautical miles on full tanks of fuel, combined with the ability to refuel mid-air. In a hypothetical mission to Iran, the B-2s could leave the Whiteman Air Force Base and then refuel off the coast of California, Hawaii, Guam, the Strait of Malacca, and Diego Garcia, south of the Maldives. From Diego Garcia, the entire Middle East is within the aircraft's operational range. Throughout the journey, which would reportedly last more than 40 hours, the aircraft will be able to practically avoid flying over any other country, maintaining its course solely through international airspace, making detection particularly difficult. If the US decided to use its entire fleet of bombers, it could potentially launch as many as 38 GBU-57s in a single large-scale attack on Iran. An attack of this scale would likely be able to annihilate several reinforced bunkers. However, there are some doubts as to whether the US actually has that many MOPs at its disposal. The most recent reports on the numbers of MOPs in the US stockpile are from back in 2011, and they only list 20 MOPs. Congress went on to approve an $81.6 million bill for improving these weapons and procuring more of them. However, the Air Force reported that it had an operational stockpile of MOPs as early as 2012. This suggests that the US believes that it has enough deep-reaching weapons to seriously challenge any of its enemies and their underground bunkers. And then there's the question of whether Iran has actually managed to build its bunkers deep enough to survive an attack from a GBU-57 MOP. That question is answered by the GPS and inertial positioning systems like the JDAM mentioned earlier. While the MOP doesn't use JDAM integration, it relies on a built-in GPS guidance kit and fins for precise navigation to its target. This would allow the US Air Force to use multiple MOPs in quick succession. In some circumstances, the result would likely be similar to the way two smaller penetration bombs could be used, with the crater being made by the former becoming the entry point for the latter. While there are no confirmed reports of this strategy being tested with MOPs, this method theoretically means that two MOPs could clear nearly 400 feet of ground or 120 feet of reinforced concrete. But consider that the US can wield significantly more than just two MOPs. It's possible that multiple MOPS could stack on top of each other's craters to deliver payloads even deeper than that. With the October operation in Yemen showing that the US can use at least a few bombers at once without being challenged, this opens the door to large-scale stealth bombing operations that it's assumed Iran or its allies won't be able to predict until it's too late. If that's the case, the proposed 300-foot deep nuclear enrichment facility could potentially be leveled in as little as a week after the initial US plans have been drawn up. It should also be noted that most of the specifications for the bunker-busting capabilities of MOPS came from the late 2000s, when the weapon was initially designed and tested. No MOPS have ever actually been deployed in real combat. Considering that Congress approved $81.6 million for improvements in 2012 and that the Pentagon reported in 2013 that testing was successful, MOPS might be deadlier than these numbers suggest. And while the B-2 is an impressive stealth bomber, it's no longer the most modern US bomber in the country's fleet. The Northrop B-21 Raider took its first flight in 2023. The B-21 supposedly has a lower carrying capacity, which would allow it to carry only one MOP. However, this next-generation aircraft has improved command and control and reconnaissance functions, which align with the US Air Force and Navy's ability to operate far from the continental US. Additionally, the B-21 is projected to actually be less expensive to construct and maintain than its predecessor, the B-2. As such, the Air Force has already announced that it plans to order at least 100, and possibly more than 200, B-21s to replace its stock of older bombers by 2050. Why is this important? Well, the B-2s are probably meant to be a message to Iran and potentially Russia about the current abilities of the US Air Force. The capacity to launch several aircraft all the way from the US mainland, refuel them mid-flight, and deploy bombs that can tear through nuclear bunkers halfway across the planet demonstrates that the US could potentially eliminate an enemy's nuclear capabilities without deploying its own nuclear arsenal. For Iran, it's a clear warning not to develop its nuclear weapons any further. Additionally, with B-21s on the horizon, the US might sell a few B-2s to Israel, which can then use them directly against Iran if needs be. But for Russia, the message is somewhat different. The B-2s were developed in the middle of the Cold War, when the Soviet Union was considered the second best military in the world. A few decades after the collapse of the Union, according to most analysts, China has taken the coveted second place. The US priming its B-2s against Iran suggests that it's starting to discount Russia as a serious contender on the global stage. However, the showcasing of the B-2's capabilities in Yemen, coupled with the potential of the MOPS to annihilate underground bunkers, demonstrates the US's ability to target fortified facilities if needed. While Russia's Arctic nuclear power plants, such as Kola and Bilibino, are above ground, the threat posed by US precision strikes underscores the vulnerability of other hardened targets in the event of heightened conflict. But the unveiling of the B-21s might also deliver another message. The US was previously unwilling to use its B-2s liberally due to a low supply. These bombers' projected lifespans are now likely to be cut short due to obsolescence in the near future anyway. The US could start using B-2s for many more operations without compromising its overall deterrence, which reinforces the idea that the country's air force still holds the reins in the global skies. Additionally, as the world's first operational sixth-generation aircraft, the B-21 poses a direct challenge to China's authority. While reports suggest that China's own sixth-generation stealth fighter may have taken its first flight, the US advancing its stealth bomber capabilities reinforces its technological edge and underscores how much ground China still needs to cover to match the West in operational deployment. But what do you think? Will the US using the B-2s more offensively be able to put a dampener on Iran's ambitions? And how will that affect Israel's war against the Palestinians, Iran, Hezbollah, and the militias in Syria, Iraq, Yemen, and beyond? Leave your comments below, and thank you as always for watching.